right next to camp. We didn't have enough bear fence to put around it because we had to run that bear fence around our tents.
If we can roll them like twice more, it'll be even better. And so
they're going to take off, and they're going to die where they die.
Welcome to the Built to Hunt podcast, brought to you by the team of hunt advisors at the Huntin Fool magazine, where we are dedicated to helping our members go on more hunts with better information. Join Huntin Fool today at huntinfool.com.
this podcast is going to be part 2 of our moose hunt extravaganza. We already did part 1. Brady, Garth, Isaiah, and myself here. Part 1, we went over logistics, how we got there, problems we ran into, but we didn't get much into the hunt stories. Garth, this was your second moose hunt, so we want to hear some of the differences from your first hunt to your second hunt, as well as hear about Isaiah's perch, where he sat up there and waited for moose to come to him, since he didn't want to move around too much. And I can share some of mine. I think we had 3 totally different experiences on our hunts, and let's share some of what we learned.
I think as far as yours and Joner's, they were probably similar in the amount of moose you saw, it sounded like.
Very few.
Sounded like you saw about the same amount, saw a couple shooters, and decided to shoot them.
That's right. But if I didn't see those shooters, I would not have got a moose.
That's probably where one of the biggest difference between, I feel like, our hunt and your guys' hunt. We did see quite a few moose on ours. But logistically, it was a little different. Right? I mean, we could see miles and miles. So we could see moose 5 miles away, but we couldn't get to them.
So typically, the further out you go on the peninsula, the less brush, trees, the weather's worse, the wind's worse, so everything gets lower and shorter the further you go out.
Right.
So because you're out on the peninsula, did you even have alders?
Oh,
did
yeah.
you have willows?
For sure. We did. I mean, but they were in smaller. Once you get up to a certain elevation, you'd get into a heavy band of alders that was pretty bad. The worst was the grass.
Just straight up grass.
There was grass that was at shoulder height. I mean, you could still see moose in it just fine, but then try to wade through that. It looked like it was easy peasy, but for the most part, I mean, it would kick your trash, and you were soaked. Like, I don't care what kind of rain gear you had on. I mean, you start trudging through that for an hour, and you're pretty much – I mean, you're going to be wet, and you're going to be exhausted. It's going to be tiring. It's just moose hunting.
So did you do any calling?
Yes. Yeah.
Do you think it helped? Did it not?
One of the moose we know came into a call, for sure. I wasn't a part of that sequence. The other guys that I went with, they had started calling early in the morning from basically their lookout. We had a couple lookouts that we would go that we could see a ton of country from. And so they went in there and they started their calling sequence. They got going, and apparently they saw this bull that was probably at least 2 miles off. And they kept calling. This moose kept inching closer and closer and closer. From what they told me, it looked like this moose had interest in what was going on. Wasn't covering a lot of country fast. I mean, it took about 4 or 5 hours for him to cover that country. But they said as soon as he got basically 1,500 to 1,700 yards away, and they called, he said he started coming on a trot across the flat. Got within 300 yards. They had a good opportunity, and they took him. But we had another bull that looked like he was coming. So hard to tell when they're that far away, in my opinion, because, I mean, it was hard to tell whether that moose was coming your direction because that's just the way he was naturally going, or if he was actually coming to your call. But we had another bull that came from, he had to have been 2.5 miles away. We called all day from this one spot, and then about a hour and a half, 2 hours before dark, we saw this thing pop up, and he was just working our direction. Got to pretty much, 2,000 yards out, and there was a huge flat, kind of a swampy spot he had to cross to get to us. He would look our direction, and the only thing that kind of keyed us off where we figured he was probably coming the call, he would stop and rake willows and screw around, and then he would start walking our direction, stop, rake willow, screw around a little bit, and then start walking our direction. But we just ran out of light.
Do you think the open terrain like that, open grass where you can see, but the moose can also see, is he looking for, kind of like an elk, he's looking for a body, he needs to see a cow out there somewhere, even at distance, before he's interested?
Maybe. I mean, most likely that might have been the scenario. I mean, I honestly can't say because it's only my second time hunting moose, but that could have been an issue. I mean, maybe he just wanted to see something. Like you say, no different than calling elk out in a meadow.
Yeah.
That's why it's way more successful, or people are way more successful calling in timber than they are out in the open. But that definitely could have been. Maybe that's why he wasn't coming very fast.
Because I thought, when I was picking places to call, I had looked on my Onyx and decided, okay, I'm going to go close to the thick stuff, close to the willows, close to the river, and find a little edge of a meadow. I'm going to get the wind right and post up on the edge of the meadow and call for a couple hours, and maybe just get a moose to stick his nose out, right, just like they do on TV.
Right.
And we never called a moose out into any sort of open. Like, I don't know if they were coming because you couldn't see. It was flat, a lot of timber, but it was frustrating. You'd see moose tracks in the meadows. You're like, they're coming out here sometime, but are they just crossing? Are they feeding? Are they they wanted to be in the timber all the time.
Yeah, I think all the moose except for one bull, we weren't sure if we called it in or if they were just passing through. Again, we were kind of in a little pinch point area, but the one bull that I scraped with the bow,
Yeah.
we had heard him in the trees and then went down and sat up and ended up just raking, and he came right out like within a minute to see what we were. So
I guess
So
that
you were
is-
close.
yeah.
Yeah.
That is the one thing. Like the bull that I shot, we had glassed him up a long ways out, and then decided to make a play on him, and so we had to jump in the boat, run down the river, jump out, and we figured, okay, this is where he was at. But the only play, because of the wind direction, we couldn't get up on anything elevated to glass him because he was in thick alders, and so basically we walked out in a swamp and set up in a little willow patch, like 5 feet by 10 feet. Out in the middle of this swamp, and started calling, and he came right in. But he was close to where we were, and we started calling, like grunting, raking. Yeah, he came right in, and he was posturing. But to me, I guess that's calling him in, but we knew where he was at. We glassed him up, and we got in his kitchen, and we pretty much had him dialed, and that was the only way we could get him, you know what I mean, to come out, and he did.
So, Isaiah, do you feel like in your scenario, you're near this lake, there's thick timber everywhere, you've got to look out. Do you feel like you were aggressive enough in your hunting approach, or were you too aggressive?
No, I think we did the best with what we could. The first day we did boat around on the shoreline, and we identified where some moose tracks were that were pretty fresh, and you could see where they'd gone up and down the banks. And then after we had a fail attempt going up or down river, and we got up on our knob, and it was only, 150, 200 feet elevation
Not much.
gain. And basically, he had a knob, and there was a big meadow in front of us that was like, the close end was 100 to like 800 yards away. But it was like there was trees, patches of trees through it. And then behind us, we had another big meadow that you couldn't see from that spot. So we climbed a spruce tree about 25 feet and built a little platform up there to sit in. And then literally every day we'd just go up there, we would rake with the bucket lid and call, and pretty much did that literally every day.
You didn't have your little handy-dandy, what's that little fiberglass?
No,
The
Kyle
bullet
advised
magnet.
me against bringing that just because they're just an awkward shape, and if you're hiking around
Yeah.
and they make noise when you don't want them to make noise, and so we just took a 5-gallon bucket lid, and then we had our oil jug for the boat motor. We cut the end of it off and
Yamalube.
used it as a call. So,
Yeah.
but the bucket lid sounded pretty dang good for raking.
Huh.
Yeah.
No, but I'd done a bunch of research on calling, and one guy that lives in Alaska had been hunting moose for 20, 30 years. He said he won't move spots until like at least 3 days of calling before he decides he's going to move.
Yeah, that's unreal to me. And I read
that's
a
where
lot
I
of
was
the
at.
same
I was
thing,
ready to
like-
move.
And I probably we had so much river to work with as we're running up and down in our mud boat. It's so frustrating being a Western hunter that's used to hiking, used to glassing, to think I got to stay put. And, we'd call for an hour and a half right before dark thinking, oh, man, a moose is going to show up first thing in the morning like you hear about. And then in the morning be like, okay, let's move. There's no moose here. We probably called in all sorts of moose up and down this river, and we were just 500
Just right
yards or
behind you every
a
time.
mile. Yeah, they'd come in, and we'd be gone to the next spot, gone to the next spot until you run into them. But it's hard when you're looking at a 10-day adventure hunt in Alaska to say, I'm just going to stay put and be patient. Well, crap, what if it doesn't work?
Yeah,
It's hard.
And that's like the one bull that we kind of ran out of light that we thought was coming to our call. He was definitely coming our direction. But we ran out of light, and so it's like, well, did that moose show up? Because we were right back there first thing in the morning calling again. Never seen him.
Nowhere
Did he show up in the dark and smell us and like, oh, yeah, I'm getting out of here because there's humans running around here? It's so hard to say, like, if they're showing up in the middle of the night. Yeah, what do you, like, then you're just kind of, and then what do you do?
I know after killing a couple moose, I don't think I'd want to shoot one right at last light and take care of it in the dark.
Oh, I don't think I'd want to.
I think about 10 in the morning is about a perfect time to kill a moose, especially if they're staying put, and that's what's hard. Everybody wants to hit the moose rut. And that's how we planned our hunt. I want to be there as close to September 15th to 20th as I can be, where my season was open there. So is that the best? Are those moose really just cruising and trying to pick up cows, or are they coming to calls? Are they stationary on a cow? I don't know. What do you think? Did you see many cows, Isaiah?
We saw more bulls than cows. There was one cow and a calf out in the meadow that we saw throughout the day, one day. Did we see another?
I think that was it. I think we saw one more cow.
Yeah.
Barely, but
No bulls with them.
But we were at the end of a big valley, and then there was a lake before it opened up into, a big flat, for hundreds of miles. So I don't know if we had moose that were just like transitioning through, but there was fresh poop, there was old poop,
right.
there were fresh rubs,
Tracks along the shoreline.
Fresh tracks, old tracks, which made me think that there were moose there, throughout the year.
Sure.
But I didn't know if like the bulls, like both bulls we shot, they came down the same peninsula. So I don't know if they were like coming to a call or if it was just like where they were transitioning through.
I know a lot of places in Alaska, the moose will move a substantial distance for the rut, where they've got their summer grounds. They like to be a little higher. They like to eat, but they will move way out to rut the cows. And then as the winter starts coming in late fall, they'll come back into the mountains and they'll live in sheep country even sometimes just to get a nice willow patch where it's windy, and they'll stay there because we find moose sheds all the time up in the mountains and the hills where you're like, I know they're not up here in August and September, but that's where they end up wintering because they can't be out there in the flats where it's 20 feet deep of snow. They want to be in the wind-blown hills and the valleys.
I feel like, though, remember that first day we went up the river? And it's all just this rocky riverbed, like not somewhere a moose is going to hang out.
Right.
They'll walk through. And we saw all that poop and all those tracks and thought, wow, okay, they've already moved down. But then obviously the moose that showed up all came from there still. So what we were saying was maybe those cows move down first, then the bulls follow a few days, a few weeks. I don't know.
I don't think it's a big deal for them to cover a lot of ground.
Right.
Yeah.
They have nothing else to do. They're solitary. They get nomadic and just take off.
Yeah.
It's not hard for them. But what was the most frustrating thing for me going along this river, every bend in the river where we would stop, where it was a thick willow patch, just perfect willows for moose habitat, you couldn't get off the boat without stepping in moose turds or a moose bed. Just hundreds of beds and scrapes, and that's what was the most frustrating thing for me.
You didn't see very many moose?
We saw
What
6
kind of
bulls.
hunter are you?
I know. 6 bulls in
He didn't
10
have
days.
the patience to stay.
Yeah.
I don't think I did because they're there. You're like, man, these tracks are so fresh. They're more fresh than my tracks yesterday. but I don't know where they are. And they could have been 20 yards behind you in the willows saying, what's that idiot doing,
Yeah.
you know? I don't think they were accustomed to much pressure. They had no reason to walk out, and the willows came right out to the edge of the river. Most places you only had 2 or 3 yards of clearing before it was just thick willows and then spruce.
Yeah.
So it was so frustrating to us because you said, well, I got a boat. I got to keep moving until I find one. And we did find some, but could we have just stayed put and called them in? I don't know.
Would you do that again? If you did that exact hunt again, what would you change?
Part of me says I got to go somewhere that I can get some elevation and glass just because I'm not patient enough.
Because it's your style of hunting.
Yeah, but it's hard. Like I have a hard time sitting in one spot, even though there's tracks and there's sign, and say I'm just going to call, because then you start doubting your calling. Am I good enough? Is it too windy? Are they even hearing me? All those things go through your head, and they're not a responding animal like a turkey or an elk that responds
Right.
back to you just as loud. So many times I would hear the moose we did see, I'd have to put the bull magnet megaphone up to my ear and just listen as hard as you could, and I'd hear one little grunt out there, and like, oh my goodness, there is a moose out there, and it would almost shock you because it was so faint. Those little whoa, so faint. You almost doubt, is that a beaver in the river? Is that actually a moose? And a couple hours later, we would see them, but that only happened a few times.
I can tell you this, because I was in a place where I could see a long ways. And I don't know what's more frustrating, not seeing moose or looking at the same bull on the same ridge 3 miles off for 3 days.
Well,
Like,
you were man enough, you would have just gone and shot him.
I would have, but I'm not man enough.
Well, I heard your friends weren't man
They
enough.
weren't man enough. I was trying to talk them into it, but they were like, no, screw you. But he was a giant bull, but he sat there on this, and I know he could hear us calling.
He wasn't coming.
He wasn't coming. He had a cow and a calf right there what he was on the whole time. There was another cow and a calf about 100 yards below him, and they never moved. Like, they never left that area for 3 days. They might maybe a couple 100 yards on this side of the canyon, a couple 100 yards on that side of the canyon, but we could see him. I mean, every day we'd show up, we'd go, maybe he's moved down. Maybe he's got tired of that cow and he's come over. Nope. Never did.
So, yeah, is it more frustrating? Do you feel like you couldn't see moose that weren't going to come in? Like, you could see everything that was available, or wasn't that open?
If they committed across this valley that we were glassing across, yeah, we could have seen them. But there were times where we thought we had seen everything that we could see on these hillsides, and then all of a sudden a cow pops out in the alders, and you're like, what the?
Where'd she come from?
No, wasn't there. Or like one of the bulls the last bull that Steve shot, we actually saw him way down on the lake and just kept calling and calling and calling. It was a nasty, crappy day. His wind was howling. The wind wasn't blowing in the morning, and that's why we think that he came that direction. It's because he could hear us in the morning, but then the wind picked up, started raining. It's just disgusting. And finally, he got to a point where we said, well, he's not going to cover that. He's not going to cover that distance to come across this in the amount of time. We have to cut that distance. So then we went after him, was able to harvest him, and then we just packed him over to a spot away from his carcass, all the meat and stuff, over to another spot. But still, it's not fun trudging across this creek bottom that's choke full of willows, and there's salmon heads laying all over and bear crap. I mean, you're just like, cool.
That is the joy of the peninsula. More bears.
Yeah. But go ahead.
How many bears did you guys see? A lot?
Yeah. I think in total we probably saw 6 or 7 bears. I mean, that's not a ton, but when you wake up in the morning, yeah, you didn't see this bear, but his tracks are walking right along your electric fence, so you know he was there that night. You just didn't see him. So, I mean, there was a bear that walked right up to. I mean, we were scared to death that a bear was going to come chomp our rafts.
Right.
Because we had them parked along the river, and they were just going up and down the river because there was just disgusting, stinking salmon everywhere.
Yeah.
So there was tracks probably every other day walking right by our raft.
Did you pee on your raft?
Yeah, we did.
Nice.
Yeah, we
And
did.
they didn't get chomped.
They didn't get chomped.
Told you.
No.
I don't know if that's what did it, but
Now tell us about the big, mean, scary black bear, Joner.
There were lots of black bears where we were at. One of them got curious and ate a hole in our tent. What was that? Third night?
I
Second
think
night?
so, yeah. Not
We
long.
we had a bear fence with us, and we were like, you know what? There's really no bear sign away, and we're out on this peninsula. I was like, it's not going to be a high traffic area for bears anyway. We were like, we don't need it. And then it was like day 3, we come back, and one of my water bags was on the ground. And it was ripped open. I was like, that's kind of odd.
it's a big squirrel.
But there was like, we had some like drink mixes, berry mixes sitting right there on a tote, and some other little food. And then we had a trash bag out in the trees, and the trash bag was like pulled apart, but not like scattered everywhere. I was like, oh, I bet it was a fisher or something came down in here, and we didn't think anything of it until that night. We got it in the tent, and then Caleb was like, what the heck? Because a raindrop dropped on his face. And all of a sudden there's like a hole this size where the bear had chewed through the side of the tent and then put his paw inside and like felt around. Fortunately, that's all he did.
But it was like 3 feet high.
Yeah.
It didn't make any sense. He was just like punch a hole in it and walk away.
Yeah. So then
That's curious.
it was like we spent the next hour and a half in the the only time it rained that night, in the rain, setting up this tent or this fence. And then that morning, Caleb actually woke up and he heard a bear walking down the beach, and the sucker got inside of our raft. Unfortunately, he ran out.
Inside the raft?
Yeah.
He was going for a spin.
He climbed up in it, and like Caleb shined out there and saw him, so he like grabbed his pistol and ran out there and like shot on the beach as the bear was running away. So then I
Shot
run
the
out there. And the stupid thing only ran like 30 yards, and it was stopped, like looking back at us. So
And you had a bear tag.
yeah, but it was like 5. It was still dark. And
Oh.
so we made sure that. So then we made sure we could see camp from then on, from where we were sitting, just in case the bear came back.
Did he ever come back?
No.
He was good.
Well, we
he was
did.
headed right there.
I did shoot a bear like just around the cove from where camp was, but
Could have been,
Could've
maybe
been,
not. There was
yeah.
probably enough bears.
That
out
bear was
there.
cruising for camp. That was for sure the same bear.
Did you ever see a grizzly bear?
Nope.
Never saw him.
I don't think the one day I think up above where we were, there were tracks that I was pretty sure were grizzly tracks. The first day where we hiked up that rocky,
Oh, yeah.
right by our boat, there were some, I mean, big claws. They were bigger pad, but other than that, it was just black bears. Lots
Nice.
of black bears.
That's nice to deal with. I never saw a bear on my hunt, which was nice. We saw a lot of tracks down the river, but no salmon in the river where I was, and the berries were almost non-existent. They were
Yeah.
miles away up in the hills to get to any berries, so we just had to deal with moose. I don't know what else would even live there.
That's
Birds
kind of a
and moose.
nice. That's kind of a nice thing, though. I mean, if you don't have to worry about that, that was kind of nerve wracking because we were able to get the one moose flown out the next day, which
Yeah.
was awesome. But the other 2 moose we had to keep with us until because we never had another window for 5 days
Right.
until we could actually get a plane to land on the lake. And so we basically built a fence, and around the one moose that we had, hell, we had that moose for 4 days up there, and we basically had it down, well, in theory, downwind of our camp until the wind changed, and then it was blowing right into camp. So depending on the circumstances, and there was a bear that did walk right by it. So, and we had alders laid out, and then we had it propped up
'Cause you didn't have
against
trees
it.
to
We didn't
hang
have any
on.
trees, but we had an alder right there, and we had a bunch of alder branches laying down, and we were able to like put the electric fence around it, so we had it elevated. But I mean,
Just wonder with them having so much access to fish right there, if they just don't.
It
That's
could
what they're
be.
focused on.
Yeah.
It's not like a bear in a caribou hunting corridor where he's used to every gut pile as a caribou.
Or high country Wyoming where
Yeah.
right.
they're like, oh,
They're
Yeah.
accustomed to what.
That's what their primary food source is.
Yeah.
No, I think there's something to be said about that because honestly, we saw a boar and a sow and a cub that were foraging on berries, like out in some of those more open type areas. But most all the bears we saw were down on the river.
Down on the rivers.
Or walking the shoreline. Like here's another situation. We had 2 moose hanging in an alder tree right off the lake. Basically, we had, went down to the lake in anticipation of a weather change where we'd be able to get out, and so we had both moose hung up in an alder tree right next to camp. We didn't have enough bear fence to put around it because we had to run that bear fence around our tents. And we were camped right off of a main trail that the only thing that used that stupid thing were bears.
Yeah.
A bear came out that night, wandered down that trail, hit like where our tents and boats and stuff were and all that moose. Didn't even pay attention to the moose and basically hit where the tree was, seen our boats, and then took off. And then you seen running tracks down the beach.
Yeah.
Really?
Which is nice.
Some
I like
of those
good
big
bears.
old bears, they're smart. They know who they're going to mess with. And if they smell moose meat and they smell your socks and your camp and everything, they're like, yeah, this doesn't seem safe.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm going to get out of here. I've been around too long for that.
Well, one thing we probably – did we ever touch on like so you were in a boat, but it was a hard bottom boat.
Hard bottom.
That you ran way up the river.
Yep.
Me and Jonah were on rafts pretty much on lakes.
Yep.
And we're running around that, which honestly, we did that the first moose hunt we did, ran around on a raft. I don't know if I would want to just get dropped off. I mean, all in all, though, we really didn't go that far because we couldn't. But having a raft to be able to get out in the lake or go across the lake or go to different areas is probably a good thing to have.
Yeah. I mean, we could have done our hunt without a motor. I mean, we had to cross.
Yeah.
We would have had to cross, 400 yards of the lake each day to get to where we were going.
And it was shallow enough you could have walked it.
Well, later on, we figured out we could have just walked across the lake.
Almost.
When after I shot my moose, we used the boat to tow it because it died in the lake back to camp, and you pretty well could have just walked it most of the way.
Did the
Around
moose,
the edge.
Did it float?
Kind of.
Not really.
You didn't wait long enough for it to real float.
We couldn't.
But I will say, just having it, like when Caleb shot his moose, we had to pack it about 500 yards to the boat and then use the boat to run it back to camp. And, that would have been
A beast without it.
yeah, it would have sucked.
Yeah.
I would say it's like a morale tool as well. Being able to get in the boat and just cover country, feel like you're doing something.
Yeah.
It's pretty nice.
It's power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We spent a lot of time in our mud boat, just flat bottom, just cruising up, down, up, down. Let's try a different spot. And then we'd go up a slough, turn the motor off and paddle up a slough, just try to be quiet and listen, and then float back out to the main river. We tried all sorts of different things. But let's talk about cutting up these moose and packing them out, because people don't realize a lot of these units you cannot debone it. Or you can debone the ribs, but maybe not the quarters. I mean, how was it where you were at, Garth?
It was nice. we could debone it.
And did you?
100%.
All of them.
Yeah, for sure. There wasn't I take that back. Yeah, did we debone? No, I can't remember. I don't think we deboned the first one because it was 100 yards, basically 150 yards from the beach.
Got it.
So we just shuttled it over to the beach and hung it up in an alder and called the plane, and they come in and picked it up. The other ones, the closest one was 3/4 of a mile from camp. And so we deboned it, took it back, and and it was. We still had to make 6 trips with deboned meat.
Of how many people?
Or not 6 trips. I should say 6 loads with
Gotcha.
4 people. So
Six.
6 loads with 4 people, or 2 loads with 4. God damn,
Yeah.
8 loads total.
So
there,
8.
There was 8 loads total.
Each of you went twice.
Yes,
Got it. Got
that
it.
was a long ways around that.
And that's including cape and horns in the end?
Yes, like the one before we couldn't debone, and so
Your hunt the year before.
the hunt the year before, and that one was a beast.
Yeah.
But
'Cause
you
that was-
sawed that one. You sawed the legs in half.
We sawed them in half horizontally because you have to leave the bone in, right? So we cut them in half because we had to pack it so far
You couldn't
over
have
2
moved the whole
miles.
quarter.
No, well, I
It's too
couldn't.
much.
I'm I mean, I'm a little.
Those quarters are big.
They
Yeah,
are
real big.
giant.
I didn't have a scale right with me to tell you exactly what they weighed, but they were. a
We
little bigger than
weighed
I thought.
the hind quarter off of my moose, and it was 123 pounds with the bone in.
123.
Is that with the hoof off?
Yes, with the hoof off.
That's good. I'm glad you did that.
No, that's a lot. I mean, 123 in your pack if you're on solid ground with hiking boots. Okay, you can do it on flat ground, but you have to go uphill or step in a swampy spot with waders on. That is a whole different ball game. 123
And
pounds.
here's the thing: it's 123 pounds. Your pack is going to weigh
I was
at
gonna say.
least 5 or 6.
Yeah.
At least.
If you got nothing.
If
in
you
it.
got nothing in it, but you're going to have a little bit of food, you're going to have water in it. If you have a pistol, you're going to have that with you.
It adds up.
If you have a rifle, you're talking about probably 140 to 145 pound pack.
Yeah.
Probably.
You're not going uphill very lot.
No.
No.
It's so ridiculous. Like I have a lot of respect for those guys that can throw a whole. I mean, even the front is heavy.
Yeah.
Like the
Front's
front's
not much lighter. I think it was like 10
Could be.
pounds lighter, wasn't it?
There's a
Yeah.
lot of bone on that front leg.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean,
All the
they're
way up the
huge.
hump.
They're actually. I mean, I think they're taller than the
Yeah.
hinds, but man, they're just so big.
So big. Yeah, where my moose died, I mean, everybody said, why'd you shoot him in the water? Why'd you shoot him in the water? That was the dumbest thing you could have done. Well, mind you, we're on day like 6, and we haven't killed a moose yet, and this moose is coming to the call. I can hear him. He crosses the river. I leave my dad and Larry, they're calling, and I'm like, I'm going to cut this moose off and see. I just want to see one, and you can't see in the timber, so I get
You
this-
heard him before you saw him?
Oh, yeah.
Heard him raking and grunting.
He was just cruising, and they don't go around trees or bushes,
Right.
I could just heard a faint whoa. I'm like, that sounds like a moose, and I had to get away from the river so I could hear,
Yeah.
away from the rapids and the sound. I'm like, man, that's a moose coming. Get the wind right, and you can hear him, and he stopped calling, but he would run into every branch, and you could hear him clunk, clunk through the water. And I'm like, he's coming right in, but I don't know. Is he going to come into 10 yards? Probably not. I figured he would stop. So I got about 200 yards away from my dad who was calling, got into this little slough area. Well, when you see a moose standing in water, it looks like he's in about 6 inches of water. Right?
Yeah.
And it's really like 3 or 4 feet deep, but it doesn't look that deep. And so the first time I see him, I'm offhand at 90 yards. He's standing in the water, stopped. I'm like, I'm not going to shoot him in the water. I'm just going to wait. And so I watch him for a few minutes, and I can tell he's done coming to the call. He's close enough. He wants to hear or smell
Wants to
something.
see something. Yeah.
I figure it's an older bull. He knows his stuff, so I'm just watching, and I don't know how long I waited, but finally I'm like, well, I'm just going to shoot him. But I'll shoot him low, try to hit him in the heart. He's not going to drop right there, right? And this slough's only 30 yards wide, so he's going to run one direction out of the water, and I'll be fine. And so I decide to shoot him right low in the heart. Turns out it was a great shot, and he spins and runs out the way he came. So I'm like, okay, don't shoot again. Let him run out of the water. So I let him get completely out of the water. Now he's going to go into the trees. I'm like, I got to shoot once more. You got to
Yeah.
put another bullet
Sure,
in
you
this
got a
huge
chance.
animal.
Yeah.
I'm not going to track him. So I shot once more just in the shoulder, and then he stops. I'm like, well, he's on dry ground. I don't really have a shot. And then he spins and runs back into the water where his first shot was, and flips
Nosedives.
face over right into 3.5 feet of water, right where my first shot was. So like,
Really?
yes, the first shot was in the water. He ran out. I shot again. Then he came back and died right where he was. And so all I could see was just a few little antler tips sticking out of the water. The rest of it was underwater.
That's
Yeah.
like my biggest, I don't know. When you think about shooting one of these things with a bow, it just makes my skin crawl. Not because you can't kill them with a bow, because
where are they
obviously
gonna
you
die?
can. But yeah, they're going to take off, and they're going to die where they die.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have no control over that whatsoever after you put that arrow in them. They're going to go somewhere and die, and 9 times out of 10, it's going to be in a crappy spot.
Yeah, they just
They're probably not going to run out in the middle of a flat
don't
gully.
have control. And so then I felt dumb, but I'm like, well, this slough gets bigger. I bet we can get the boat up in here. Well, we tried. There was a beaver dam. There was no way we were getting our boat over to drag him out of that slough. So then we got our should have brought a come along That was our mistake. We should have had a
What
pulley
would you have
system.
done with it? Pull the boat up, or?
No, just
Pulled
to
the
pull
moose
the
up.
moose out of the water. Because
okay.
you could have got him out of the water. We had enough rope, and we could have got him out of the water, but you had no leverage. You had no winch. You had no nothing, right, to work off of. So we just built a wannabe pulley system of rope on the trees, and it took us about 2.5 hours. But we moved him 30 yards into shallower water, and he was in about 20 inches of water where we took pictures and cut him up. You know, it was a cold, wet day, but the sun was up. It was hard to complain because we had a dead moose, but it was underwater.
Wow.
I feel like we were like extremely lucky with both of ours.
Unbelievably so.
Caleb's, he shot his and hit him like 3 times. Boom, boom, boom. Moose goes down. And like if he would have been 10 yards, the one direction, he would have been in swampy crap.
Oh, that's right.
But
If
he
would have
died
continued on
like
his
he
path.
died in the open with trees 10 yards away, dry ground, solid ground, like
It's just
flat,
nice, soft
flat as a
tundra.
pancake. Super nice. And that was the first moose I'd ever worked up, which they're big, but it wasn't like overwhelming. I mean, just everything takes a little more time. Their hide's a little thicker, they're a little bigger.
Yeah.
We had to take the ribs out on the bone, and we had never done that before, and it was like, we had a couple saws, which ended up figuring it out, but that worked out all right. So,
Which I hate doing that, right?
yeah.
That is the hardest piece of meat to deal with, is the ribs on the bone. Is no matter how we've cut them, that top one is always sharp.
Yep.
You've always got a sharp edge, and it's hard to fit it in a game bag, and it's hard to lay both of them together because they're not that heavy, but they're hard to get to stack well together.
Yeah.
It's just a pain in the butt to deal with.
Yeah, so it wasn't terrible, and then I think Brady and I each took 2 loads, and then Caleb took a third because he had the head. But we only had to go about 500 yards, pretty well, just flat ground, right to the raft. And then my moose, he died in the lake, like
wet.
belly deep water.
Yeah. Like
And
we couldn't we putted the boat up to it
Wow.
and saw a couple tines sticking out.
And then we hooked a rope around his paddles.
What was the process here? Like, what are we going to do? Or are you like, oh, we're fine, we got a boat?
Don't think there was much thought
Last
going on.
last
It was
day.
like the moose is dead. That's
Well,
our
that was
message.
it. It was like last day he was on the beach, and then he just decided, like, he was walking into a lake, but he was like, it was a mile to the other. Like, I don't know what he was doing. Like,
He was
Made
dying.
no sense. No, he wasn't
No,
shot
Before
yet.
you shot.
before I shot him, he was
Oh.
walking down the shore. It was so calm and so quiet. I think he heard us coming, and he ended up turning around and like walking away from us. And then he like starts walking out in the lake, and it was, like 800 yards. But there was another boat that had just gone by, so I'm like, they're going to see him too.
This is a big moose. This
yeah.
is your bull.
And then like he wasn't on the same like shoreline we were on, and so there was no like just run to get closer. It was like, I'm on a shoreline, he's across the lake on another shoreline. Now he's going to swim the lake. I was like, I'm shooting from here.
But he was swimming. He wasn't coming towards us. He was going like parallel to us, just out to the middle of the lake. It didn't make any sense.
But he's in shallow water still. He's not swimming. He's
No,
just
he
walking.
was.
He was
The
walking.
water was almost up to his belly. And I was like, well, I'm going to shoot. So after the shot sequence,
There's always a shot sequence with Isaiah.
he's dead in the water. We boat up to him, pull him like up, and then we were like, oh, let's see if this little boat can pull him. So
What'd you hook the rope to?
Yeah, that's what I'm curious.
there was a little eyelet on the back of both.
On either side of the
Pontoon.
pontoon.
The
so we
rubber
just-
ones that are glued in?
Yeah, they just glued in. I was
thinking there was something on the transom you were hooking it to, and
there
then
wasn't.
It was the last day. We were close
It
to
was the
shore.
last day
were
we
like,
could swim.
we can sink the boat.
Yeah.
No worries.
Didn't matter.
So Caleb and I got out and walked the shoreline, and then Brady pulled him around, but he kept like his paddles and nose kept like digging in, and so we ended up like lifting his head out of the water and
walking him.
Well, they walked out. So I came around this kind of point, and I was thinking, I'm 200 yards offshore. It's got to be deep enough. And I keep seeing the moose. The head would go down, and I was worried about it hitting the prop. So then I'd stop, and the head would twist around, and you'd see all this, like, dirt and bottom
dragging.
gunk. But then they saw that, and they just walked out like 100 yards to meet me and just kind of slowly putted, and they pulled it along and brought it right to camp.
How did you get it, once you got it to the gravel bar or the beach, how did you get it out of the water onto the beach hole?
Rolled them.
Man up.
Did you really roll him?
Uh-huh.
Oh,
Dude,
my goodness.
We rolled them till it was
wet
like
moose
good
rolling.
enough, and then I was like, if we can roll them like twice more, it'll be even better.
Dude,
And
there was
so-
some grunting going on. Maybe the water, helps
Made him heavier.
lubricate him to flip over.
Well,
I
and it
don't
was
know.
like there was enough of a little, like it
That
was
was
like
gradual.
rocks like down in.
Super
so it,
gravelly, though. And I think that helped a lot, too, because we were able to, like, kind of dig out a spot and roll them into a hole and then push
Like
and
you were
pile
working.
No, I guarantee what's going on is Brady's like, we got to get good pictures. We're getting him out of the water. And Isaiah's like, let's just do it here.
no, well then I was like, where he was, I was like, if we have him, we've already rolled him twice. Like
We can do it.
we can do it again, and it'll just make it that much easier for like
Taking
cutting
care of
him
it,
up.
yeah.
Because if not, we're gonna be like half in the water, and so.
Well, your pictures are awesome because you did get him out of the
Yeah.
water. I mean,
Yeah.
he's wet, but
Yeah.
it
was.
allowed for some cool depth on your photos with that lake.
So we only had to pack that one like 100 yards.
But even that
That's
100
ideal.
yards, Isaiah said we're going to carry him. And I said, nope, we'll put him in the boat. And
Oh,
even
yeah.
100
I carried
yards.
1 quarter, and I was like, yeah, that was dumb.
Like, camp is right there. And it's still so much work just to move any part of that moose.
That's
So much.
why I just remember me and Cody down there taking care of that first moose we shot, and it was just me and him, and we got the one side worked up. Took both quarters, backstrap, tenderloins, the rib meat, like neck meat, got everything worked up on that side, and then we're like, okay, let's flip him over. Dear Lord.
Half
I
of
mean,
starting
those.
over.
Oh my! I was like, and now at this point we're like, well, we can't flip him over because the antlers are laying there,
Yeah.
and they're blocking him from turning, and we can't we tried to like roll his head in a position to where then it wouldn't catch,
Like you're doing on an elk.
and we're just like, screw it, we're just gonna cut his head off at this point. Like, let's just take the head off, and then we can roll him. And once we got the head off, then we could roll him. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm constantly. It's about the only animal that honestly, when I pull the trigger, I'm like, okay.
I don't have to do this every year. So let's talk about what we did with the meat after. So to give some guys an idea, because everybody, I want to shoot a moose. A lot of good meat, and there is. But Isaiah, did you bring your 2 moose home?
No. So with Caleb's bull, we shot him, I think it was day 5 in the field.
Mhm.
Prior to flying out, we asked Eric about keeping moose meat, and he said, well, yeah, you can, but what do you, like, who's going to cut it up for you?
Yeah.
Who's going to freeze it?
Where are you
So-
gonna store it?
Where are you going to store it? He's like, I have 6 freezers and they're full. And so he said, I'll debone. I think he said he could maybe do 1 quarter and the back straps, and he would put it in a box to freeze it for us. But everything else was getting donated. And so pretty much we didn't even, I mean, we got that moose back to camp. The next day the plane came in, picked it up, took it out. I reached him, said, hey, please save these aside. We put the back straps in a different colored meat bag so he knew exactly what they were. And then with my moose, we killed him, and the pilot came in and got him like 3 hours after I'd shot him, and then he came back and picked us up. So we flew out the same day with my moose, hung it back at Eric's place, and then the next day we basically decided, we checked with Lake and Penn Air to see if they had available room on the flight the next day, and they said they had some space. So what do we cut up? Both hindquarters.
Mm-hmm.
Processed it yourself a little.
Yep.
One front, I think.
No, the neck meat,
Oh, the neck meat is what.
which was
Caleb
like
took.
90 pounds of neck meat.
So, oh yeah, that's something that is worth mentioning. Is you look at a moose or any animal and you think, okay, 4 quarters and then some extra, right? Backstrap, well, whatever. the neck meat on a moose is not only a lot, but it's so much work to cut through. Like, I ended up cutting both of the necks just because on the second one I was like, I feel like I learned a ton doing the first one, and it's hard.
There's a lot of neck.
There's a lot on that.
Yeah, I think we saved an hour from Caleb's bull to my bull just doing one of them, like figuring out like how to take the ribs out.
Yeah.
How to work together.
Yeah. And so, so we were able to process it there in a shed up in Alaska, put it in. We went to a little store, bought some fish boxes, loaded them up with like 80 pounds of meat a piece.
Brought it home.
But that's a spare day, too. Keep that in
That's a
mind.
whole day.
That was a spare day. We actually took the other quarters and went and donated them to a lady in town. And so, but again, though, I think Lake and Plein Air, that had to go out on like 2 different flights because they're like, just bring what you have and we'll see if we can fit it. And then if we don't, we'll just put it in our freezer. So,
Yeah.
A lot of work.
yeah.
And we had connections, right? If you don't have a
Someone
friend, if
on
you
the
don't
other
have a
side.
car to use, if you don't have a way to get to the store, a way to bring the moose meat from where it's landed to the airport.
Yeah, how are you going to do that?
I think when you're looking,
You don't.
when you're looking at a moose hunt, guided or unguided, you have to figure out those logistics beforehand and realize you might not be able to bring it home.
Well,
and it might not be worth it.
yeah, a lot of guys want to bring the meat home, which I understand. But at the end of the day, like, you need to plan on another $1,500 probably, and like
At least.
shipping, like getting it from point A to point B back home. Like, there's a lot that goes on with that.
I mean, we brought an entire moose home.
Only
But
one for
Only
everyone.
one, because, I mean, the other 2, we can't afford to bring it back. You know what I mean? Like, and we had made prior arrangements with, what do you call them? Expediter, to basically take care of that meat. So we sent it out on the plane, and luckily enough, like the transport company that we were working with, like, they took it and dropped it off at a cargo facility to ship that into Anchorage, and then the expediter picked it up in Anchorage and then took it to a butcher that we had prearranged with. And then it got cut up. I mean, obviously it didn't get cut up like that week,
Right.
but a month later when they got it out and got it all taken care of and sent it to us. But we had 4 people splitting the cost of all this.
Mm-hmm.
The total bill, I mean, not dividing it up, was probably close to $2,500 to have that animal taken to the butcher, have them process it, have the expediter pick it up from the butcher, and then take it down to the air cargo
And
ship it to us in
And then you got to go.
insulated boxes. Then we got to drive to the air cargo facility here and pick it up and bring it back down here. Like,
It was a lot.
it was a lot. You start adding up how much that is per pound.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It ain't cheap.
Then add your hunt cost.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's like – so I will say that moose meat is incredibly good. Like,
Sure.
it's certainly worth getting, but definitely flying it to the lower 48 adds a whole new level of
Adds a lot.
expense and headache.
And I think it's okay to donate your meat. There's a lot of programs. There's a lot of people, especially in these smaller towns and villages, that are willing and able to accept it. And it doesn't shed a bad light on non-resident hunters if it's taken care of properly.
Right.
And it's not just, oh, I'm donating this, so I'm not going to keep it as
Dragging it
clean
through the
and
weeds.
dry. Or they really hate it when you're like, well, I want the hind quarter and the back straps, tenderloins. You can have the rest. No, give them the whole thing. Do it right. Take even better care of it than you would take care of your own meat, and you'll probably be okay with it. But every village I go to, I get to hear the stories from the locals complaining about the non-residents because they were on a call list. A lot of these transporters will put together a call list of families to call to see if they want meat from a caribou or moose or whatever, and if it's not taken care of right, that's how a lot of these ugly proposals get started against non-residents, is because we look bad, right?
Well, realistically, I've went over there a number of times. Now, granted, maybe it's just the people I go with. We take good care of the meat. Like, we make sure it stays clean, as dry as we can possibly keep it. Like, take precautions on all this. I don't know if it's always or if it's just a stigma that is stuck with it, because you hear a lot of the locals say, oh, you don't take care of meat the way we take care of meat. We do the best job ever. It's the cleanest, most, I mean, just you could basically just take that and just start cutting it up and eat it right off the way we take care of it. I don't necessarily know if that's the case.
No,
I just think it's like them pointing at someone else saying, you don't do as good a job as we do. The guy that we donated our meat to, so thankful, so happy, just was like, oh, this is amazing. I couldn't get out this year. I have a tag, but I couldn't get out. I was too busy. I was wrapped up with work. Took the meat. He never said, oh, no, how did you skin that?
Yeah.
Did you take care of it properly?
Well,
It's
you
probably
gotta
the
think,
exception.
too, like, a lot of these little villages or towns, like, they're in the middle of nowhere. There's not a big road system. So they don't have the means that, or an airplane or the funds to go hire a transporter to take them out in the field.
Sure.
And then unless there's opportunities to boat on river, like, it's not like, I think we get a misconception too of like, oh, they live in Alaska, they hunt moose. Like,
Yeah.
That's not
possible.
the case.
Right. It's very difficult. But I think when you show up in a village and it's all about your antlers and they see these 65-inch wide antlers laying there, they associate with you, the bad ones. You're a trophy hunter. You're killing my moose, right? Now, if the meat doesn't live up to how well the antlers have been taken care of, now you look real bad, right? But most transporters will help you, like, hey, let's make this meat look nice. We'll get it taken care of right away and donated right away, and just pass the antlers aside. Don't even talk about the antlers until you get out of those little places, and everything will be better.
Now, because you brought up a point that's like, oh, yeah, most of the locals look at it and say, oh, you're trophy hunting. Because you have a nice, you know, you have a big set of antlers that comes out. Well, Alaska Game and Fish in most areas has to be 50 inches at least. So
I know.
you are forced to be a trophy hunter.
Correct.
Like, it's not your decision. It's you're forced to shoot a mature animal, which I don't disagree with, because you are taking a mature animal that's probably lived his life, hopefully past his prime. There's other young animals coming up and can breed and can carry on longevity. Anyway, it's a good, sound management practice.
It is.
But it gets this stigma saying you're a trophy hunter. I don't know where that came from.
You only came up here for the antlers.
I mean, I just gave you a ton of meat, so there's that.
But
exactly.
I think it's important.
You only
though,
came home with the antlers.
No, I shipped an entire moose home. So what I'm saying is there is this stigma that's put out there for non-residents that all they care about is antlers, but I don't think that's necessarily viable. I don't think that's accurate.
I know, but it does happen, though. You don't disagree with that?
It
Well, I think-
does, but to a far lesser extent than that's the norm. And they
For
put
sure.
it out there.
I'm talking
that
about
this is the
exception.
norm.
I'm just saying we need to be careful and be aware that you could be seen that way. That's all I'm saying, because you've seen what happens when 500 hunters go to Kotzebue and shoot caribou, and they bring antlers back into town, and they maybe got their moose or their caribou meat stolen by a grizzly bear, or it's dirty. And how does it look? You have overrun my town, and it's the not in my backyard thing.
Does it look as bad as when they're like feeding caribou meat to their dogs or letting it waste?
I will say, like, all the outfitters we work with, most of them encourage hunters to leave their moose meat
Yes.
in the village or
Where you took it from.
where you took it from.
There's
And again,
definitely
like-
a tolerance for
Like
that.
Eric up there with Bushwhack, he has a program through one of the churches there. The pastor runs it. He donates a majority of their moose meat to them, and then they process it or cut it up, and then they basically delegate it throughout the community to people in need. So
It's like a no-win situation. You're helping out people that are there. No, I'm just saying, like, it is. I think it's very good that you're able to donate meat. I love that you can do that, and I think the people that are accepting that meat, 99% of them are very appreciative and are glad that you're doing that for them.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden, just like Austin said, well, you didn't ship the moose home, did you? Well, you didn't bring any meat home. You just brought the horns home, or maybe it was Joner said that. Well, yeah, that's right. I did bring the antlers home, but it's because it's cost
you were just being a
prohibitive
nice guy.
to ship everything
Yeah.
back. So, like I say, it's almost like a no-win because then they're like, see, you just came up here for the antlers.
I think what Austin's trying to say, though, is like anyone that goes there, you are a guest in a world that's not your own.
I
right?
agree.
And you have
It
no
is,
idea
well,
what it's like.
Technically, it's America. So.
Is it, though? Come on, Garth. You don't know what it's like to live there. You know, the people that live in those smaller villages, they have very limited, like, even travel. It's hard to get out of there. So your world gets a lot smaller. And then the input is these non-resident hunters coming in, like Austin said. You know, come in, got some crappy meat that you donate and bring the antlers home. I think, like, the point is you have a responsibility to do as good a job as you can. Yeah, it's a no-win, but do everything you can to make non-resident hunters and yourself look good.
Agreed.
Okay, let me ask about fishing, Brady. You're out there in Bristol Bay. There's some old guy with a dip net up the river, and he's just dying to catch his salmon for the day, and you're out there just mucking them up with your gill nets by the thousands. How is that perceived?
And he just wants one.
Do the locals hate the commercial fishermen that are right outside their inlet?
The difference is it's not a hobby.
How? Because economics
mean?
don't matter of this, but he's trying to subsist off salmon, and you're catching them before they get to him.
Yes. Well, they're used
But he's
to that
okay
too.
with you?
Yeah. They're used to it. It's more accepted. But it's also
as soon as he doesn't catch a salmon, he's mad.
Then the
and that's what's
commercial guys are
happening in
trouble.
Kotzebue.
That's a good point.
It's more difficult for him to catch caribou all winter long,
Yep.
5 a day.
Yep.
He's like, they're not showing up at my house. I can't kill them, so it's the non-resident. Yeah, I go upstream and I find out where the problem is.
I guess that was my whole point of being the devil's advocate is the perception
That's 100% perception.
is far more that's more what it is a perception more than reality.
For sure.
But yeah, I do think Brady is 100% right, and do everything you can to take good care of that meat, and like don't leave the town or don't leave that village shining a bad light on non-resident hunting because it just leads to this. But I guess my point is it's the way it's going. I think most non-resident hunters are very astute and probably try and go over and above to do the right thing, and we're still getting like hit with this age-old, you guys don't do it good, we do it better. Like, and we're just like caribou hunting. We're getting more and more things taken away from non-residents. Even though the vast majority of non-residents do a pretty good job, I believe.
So what's the answer, Garth?
Get up there while you can, because no matter what we do, we're just going to –
You're going to be screwed eventually.
He's a farmer at heart, man.
Cut it while you can.
no, I mean –
it's all going wrong every year.
Honestly, like it's such a cool thing, and so I just scared because I love to go up there and I love to hunt Alaska because I do feel like it's kind of the last thing that is somewhat affordable that you can have this experience where you're not just overrun with other people.
Yeah.
And I guess that's the one thing that maybe a local looks at is like, yeah, we used to not be overrun until you started coming up here and overran us.
I don't know. That lake we went to was pretty overrun.
Was pretty overrun. SeaTac Airport.
Oh, shoot. Well, I appreciate you guys taking the time to share some of these stories and hopefully give a moose hunter, whether he's going guided or unguided or thinking about planning one, some ideas on what to look forward to and what to plan for, because it is a planning logistical nightmare.
Plan on work.
Garth, tell me your desire as we close here. Are you going to go back moose hunting? Are you a trophy moose hunter now? Is it kind of one and done or two and done?
Honestly, I think I would probably like to go back again. But I feel like it needs some time so I can lick my wounds because I'm kind of a little girl when it comes to that. Like it's just a lot of work. You know what I mean? And you think about other hunts you go on up there. It's work, but not the same. Like you're not living in muskeg. You're not living in the swamps. You're not inundated with no-see-ums and white socks and mosquitoes. And you know what I mean? It's just a different feel.
So you still like Alaska, but
love it.
There's
But
other things to hunt.
I do think that it would be if I went back moose hunting, it's the point now where I'm like, I don't need to kill one. I just want to go for the experience. So unless he's an exceptional animal, not trophy hunting, but I kind of am.
You would just rather pack out the 50 inchers for your friends.
That's what I'm hearing. Yeah.
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 Because you ain't going by yourself.
No, but I'm just going to take someone that doesn't want to shoot.
It's
anything.
selective. What
Good
about
luck.
you, Isaiah?
I definitely want to go back again. Maybe a different type of experience than what we had last time. Hopefully more of like a ridge hunt, spot and stock maybe. Attempt to finish it with the bow. So,
Got it.
but again, like we had an incredible hunt. We killed giant moose,
It's
but
gonna
I
be
don't
hard
know.
to top that.
I just don't know if like that
Very
style of hunting is what I'd be like all jazzed to go back for.
You?
I'd like to go back someday. The cost is definitely prohibitive on even the unguided stuff. Like, how
Right.
often can you do this? What other hunts could you do instead? Caribou's definitely high on my list right now because moose numbers are doing great
Yeah.
in a lot of Alaska, but caribou are struggling.
But can you get to a lot of those places where they're doing great?
Yeah, that's the struggle and the expense. But I would like to shoot a moose. I didn't shoot mine with a bow, and I'd like to shoot one with a bow someday. But then you say, would I shoot a smaller one with a bow? Ugh. Man, that sounds like a lot of work. Just to say I shot it with my bow?
Exactly.
Like, I don't care that much. I shot it. But I would like to go back someday. But I don't think it'll be anytime soon.
Yeah. It's just, I love it. But, man, I'll tell you, those guys that kill moose every single year up there, my hat's off to them. Like, you
It's a
know
lot
what
of
you're
work.
getting into every single year, and you're still looking forward to it. It's like,
If only we had a coworker with a Super Cub, we could go do this.
No kidding. Brady?
Get my pilot's license.
100%. You're young.
I don't know.
So you did film Isaiah and Caleb's hunt,
Mm-hmm.
and it will be coming out sometime on YouTube.
This spring.
Sweet.
I think I can say that confidently.
This spring.
Yeah.
Like 2024 spring. We're going to put a date
Mhm.
on this.
Yes.
Okay.
March 23rd.
I have one more question though. Because Garth, you've killed 2.
Well, I've killed one.
You've killed one.
I was in on the kill when I went the first time, but I wasn't the shooter.
I guess my question is about what you guys think of the flavor, or like how good the meat is. Like, how much do you enjoy eating moose meat, and have you found a lot of variation between different moose? Because what I've found, like the moose that my dad would kill growing up, were not that good normally. But then this one that
Probably
Isaiah
because
got,
you guys weren't careful with the meat process.
dang locals,
Resin lessons.
No, he was just in a different area. I mean, he hunted a couple different spots, but the meat that you brought back, Isaiah, that's fantastic. It's tender, or a lot of the cuts are tender. You know, I've been able to make steaks out of the hind quarter, which is abnormal on moose from my experience. But then Promise is saying that she's had moose that taste really good like that her whole life, and I was wondering what you thought.
I think a lot of it is how you prepare it too. Like I think of eating elk and deer growing up, and it was like you never could. Like my parents never cooked it right,
Yeah.
and we've come so far with even with like smokers and the grilling and like how meat should be cooked. Like I think a lot of it has to do with that too.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my experience with it is I've had some super tender moose, like the first moose hunt we went on. We cooked up some of that. We didn't bring a lot of that meat home. We donated most of it, but we did cook some in camp. Super tender, really good. I will say the flavor on all of it has been excellent. But this last moose we brought back has been a little tough.
Yeah.
So flavor is still on point, really good, but it's a little
tough.
It's a little tough. And I don't know.
Don't know why, right?
No, I
Just
mean,
kind of changes moose to moose.
basically we did. I mean, we didn't process this one, so once it left our possession at the lake and got transported over, I'm assuming they did everything right. But like those guys have ate. The other guys in our group have cooked roast on it, and they said it. Like even their family, their wives or kids, they said they would rather eat that roast, that moose roast, than beef.
If you slow
Said it's
cook it,
amazing.
oh yeah.
So I do think it's probably one of the better animals to eat.
I was worried about mine because we knew he was an older bull. The meat I brought home, the meat we cooked there in the field, but it's been excellent.
Yeah.
All of it. But the rut was later this year. The locals always talk about rutty moose, right? They want to shoot one early. They don't want to shoot one in the rut. And ours, I don't feel like we're rutting that hard yet. They didn't stink bad. So however much you believe that affects it, I feel like I was about September 19th on the early end of the 2023 rut. So mine smelled really good. Obviously, it was nice and rinsed off because it was all underwater when we drug the meat quarters off. Never really got dried out. But what I brought home and what we ate there was just been excellent. It's not muskox, it's not Dall sheep, but it's dang good for moose. And my bull, he just got aged, came back at 8.5 years old.
Are you serious?
Which is a lot older
That's
than I thought he would be.
Wow.
But
From what I understand, moose get.
yeah, right. They were saying a lot of those older or bigger bulls are 4, 5.
Yeah.
So he's older than even I thought, but he's ate really good.
That's cool.
But, it's because I took care of him. So
Yeah,
good.
it's just how you cook them.
There's the meat bag.
Well, one quick thing, like you mentioned that your moose, the meat that you got, because it never really dried out.
Never did.
So that's like a taboo thing. Like it's always, keep the meat as dry as you possibly can.
Right.
The first moose that we harvested, like the first year, basically we would tarp it every night and try to keep it like
'Cause
dry.
It was raining.
But it would rain every single night. So that meat just didn't get dry.
100% humidity.
So, but we got it back and it was fine. Like it tasted great. The moose this year, we did everything we could to keep it dry. We kept it pretty dry, but it's just so humid out there that it's like you can't ever keep it totally dry. Still, I mean, it doesn't seem to have that big of an effect on it. I don't know.
Well, I mean, trimming plays a part of that, right?
Yeah.
Sure.
Water just allows bacteria to grow, but
Right.
if it stays dang cold, like we put my moose in meat bags, carried it over to a tree, hung it up, tarped it, then took the meat bag off so it would dry and crust out as much as it could, but it was still just dripping. You know, it looked like a raisin, all the meat, because it was so waterlogged.
Dang.
Yeah.
It turned that gray color and everything, but you try the best you can. You can't control everything, but luckily it was cold enough we didn't have to deal with flies or anything. So I try to keep the meat bags off as much as possible.
Yeah.
As long as you're not protecting from flies or dirt, it's better to have the meat bag off and let it crust up. So all good things. Watch Isaiah's video coming out soonish. If Brady will get back to work. But thanks for listening to the Built to Hunt podcast. And it's January already, so get looking at your Wyoming applications, Arizona applications, and give us a call if you need any help.